and welcome back to another stupendously classic episode of Guess What? You're Wrong. Now, tonight, I said classic. But actually, before we get into that here, we got a little bit of housekeeping to do. I know it's been January was kind of a scream month for recording and putting out episodes and stuff. Work has been nuts. I have a lot of things in the works that are going forward that we're going to be getting into. Now, this episode here is my first foray into some classics. Now, I thought with the classics, everybody always thinks of, and even before I had mentioned, I had wanted to tackle some movies like, the Universal horror, the 50s, nuclear scare horror movies like them and Tarantula and that kind of stuff. But thinking about it, and actually a friend of mine, Brian from Rhizome Comics and Plants, made mention to me of some other classics to go back a little bit further. So what we're going to do is we're starting in the 20s. That's right. The 20s, you say? Yeah, the 1920s. The first movie we're going to be covering is actually from 1922, Nosferatu. Now, I know there's a lot of people had to have seen this, right? You had to. It's Nosferatu. I have seen this movie several times. It's a silent movie. So if you don't have patience for that, or if you're of the younger generation, you might not get into this too much. Now, the movie was directed by F.W. Murnau. IMDb, the IMDb, has credit going to Bram Stoker as a writer for this movie. Now, the stars, we have, we'll get into the whole Bram Stoker's Dracula thing here in a minute. Max Schreck, who plays Graf Orlok. Graf Orlok. Alexander Grenache, who plays Nach in Hausenmakler. Gustav von Wangenheim, who plays Hutter. I'm doing my best here, okay? Greta Schroeder, who plays Ellen in Seinfeld. George A. Schnell, who plays Harding. Ruth Lanzoff, who plays Ruth, and on and on. I mean, there's a bunch of people here in this movie. This is a classic movie. Now, it is Bram Stoker's Dracula. Okay. The storyline, everything. If you look at the history of this, the lawsuits, everything that happened when this movie was actually being produced and was coming out, it is directly based off of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now, a lot of the stuff was changed in the movie. They changed all the names. Orlok is not Dracula. Mina is not in there. Her name is, I think, what was her? Ellen. Yeah, it's not Mina Harker. It's Ellen. It's not Jonathan Harker. It's Hutter. And I think Harding is the one that plays the Renfield character. So they changed, and the places were all changed too. Now this takes place, I'm guessing, I think it's in Germany. Everything's in German. So the names of the actual characters were changed, as well as locations and stuff from the movie or the book, Count or Dracula by Bram Stoker. Boy. Anyway, the movie was. Let's go over some trivia here real quick. The movie was banned, and this is thank you IMDb for your trivia expertise. The movie was banned in Sweden due to excessive horror. Can you get that? It was banned in Sweden due to excessive horror, and the ban was finally lifted in 1972. And there was the history of this movie is okay. So when it was released, Bram Stoker's wife, I can't remember her name, but she was surviving, from what I understand, pretty much solely on royalties from Bram Stoker's book Dracula. when she had found out about this movie, she had demanded recompense. I mean, hey, you're using my husband's stuff. You gotta pay me, dude. You know what I mean? But they didn't pay her. Um, in the end, basically what they did was they were forced to destroy every single copy that they had of this movie. Now, obviously, not all of them got destroyed. I mean, there was versions of this movie had been distributed around the world, so it was out there. Um, some of the original, because it's a silent film, so some of the original subtitles and such were lost. They weren't able to be found. So even in a lot of the remakes that they have now, it's like I have a Criterion Collection one here, and Criterion Collection is supposed to be the bomb diggity, yo. But they're not the original subtitles or words on the screen that was originally put out with the movie, because those movies supposedly were lost. Supposedly, keep that in mind. Um, all known of the prints of the negatives were destroyed under the terms of the settlement um, from the lawsuit by Bram Stoker's widow. The film would subsequently resurface through second generation reels in other countries, which is how we have the movie now. And you know, Count Orlok. This Let's talk about Count Orlok. This visage. Is that the correct word? I don't even fucking know. The image of Count Orlok and how he looks. Um, it's very, to me, it's reminiscent of the Salem's Lot vampire. When I was young, that movie had come out on TV. It was one of those miniseries that you could watch on TV. Freaked me out. Now, it wasn't until years later that I had seen Nosferatu, but those vampires are, oh yeah, baby. The visage, the whole image of Max Schreck as Orlok, it's spectacular. His long fingers, the nails, his head is, deformed a little bit. I can't say deformed. It's bald and he's got a big head. So it really, really makes um, that character of Count Orlok, uh, the vampire, Dracula, very effective. Um, now, also, while this movie was based off of Bram Stoker's Dracula, the story, a lot of the stuff was changed. Like I said, the the springboard for the common Count Dracula is what we see in Universal's Dracula. Comes out in the next decade. We'll be covering that as well, but played by Bela Lugosi. That was the springboard for the common uh, vampire. The handsome, debonair kind of, you know, my shit don't stink kind of vampire. You know what I mean? Uh, but Orlok, Murnau, when he was making this movie, this the story here behind the looks of Orlok and his actions and how he goes about things is very reminiscent to the actual vampires of folklore in Eastern European countries at the time. The It wasn't until later on that that Count Dracula or the vampires became you know fancy, I guess you could say. Good stuff. Now, while Orlok's account, he owns the storyline is the same. You know, uh, there's a rich and powerful, famous count in Transylvania who wants to buy land, um, you know, in the civilized country. Now, Hutter, think Jonathan Harker, was sent off to visit Count Orlok to arrange this purchase. The story sounds very familiar, doesn't it? Bram Stoker's Dracula, baby. Um, Now, the film was very loosely based on Bram Stoker's book, but of course, the characters' names were changed in an attempt to prevent legal action. Um, the subtitles and everything were all, translated to French and German, English in the USA, and all this stuff. But because of all the original prints being destroyed, they were left with some of these second generation films. So in order to get some of those subtitles, they had to search far and wide. And I got a little piece of trivia here that let's see, the American versions went to the UK, and that was translated back to German for release there. When restorers were about to make a definitive version, they were looking through a number of archives. Unfortunately, all the prints they found had the changed subtitles, so they gave up hope of being able to recover the originals. They later heard of a good print in an East German archive. When they got there, they found out that the print had been loaned out. The restorers were then offered to have a look at another print from the archive, which wasn't considered as good a print as the other one. When the restorers observed that print, they discovered that the original subtitles were in it. The original ones they thought were gone. So that was a plus and a bonus. Now, some more trivia here. Many scenes featuring Graf Orlok or Count Orlok were filmed. Graf Orlok, was there another movie called Count Orlok? I don't know. I can't remember. But anyway, they were filmed during the day, and when viewed in black and white, this is very, very obvious. So when you watch the movie, there are times in the movie where when they're showing Orlok, that the screen is blue. Okay, they did this to let you know that it's nighttime. So even though it was filmed in the day, they had this blue. It is what it is. But let's see. Anything else here? Yeah. Okay. It does. The trivia here does mention Shadow of the Vampire from 2000, starring Willem Dafoe. It's a fictionalized depiction of the events surrounding the film's production, based on the urban legend that Max Schreck was actually a vampire. And if you've seen that movie, Shadow of the Vampire, they eh, Max Schreck. I mean, this was a big. This was a big. Oh, I don't say a tale, a conspiracy that Max Schreck was actually a vampire, which is the reason why he could play the part so well of Orlok. Believe what you want to believe, I guess. Who am I to say you're full of shit or not, right? Now the film, while recorded and it comes out in 22, it actually takes place in 1838. So you can see from the film, watching the movie, like scenes where Hutter's walking through the city streets and stuff, and he's meeting with people that he. This film, even though it is old, it's from the 20s, it was made to look even older. Good stuff. Um, okay. The schooner which transports Count Orlok is called Impusa. This is a reference to Greek mythology. The Impusa is a type of shape-shifting phantom in Greek legends, always feminine. It was thought to prey on young men for seduction and for food, and in some versions, crave the blood of its victims. It is typically identified with the flesh-eating lamia and the bugbear like Mormo. Okay, that's interesting, right? Um, so the movie, it's minus also from Dracula, the movie. I can't remember the cowboy's name in the story Dracula, but he's not in this, and neither is Van Helsing. All right, those characters are not in this on this Nosferatu story at all. And on top of that, Nosferatu, um, the name of the vampire, his name was Orlok. Nosferatu, it's an archaic Romanian word for vampire. right? Um, so Orlok, I don't know. The na- the name of the movie Nosferatu is iconic. You say Nosferatu to somebody, they know they've seen an image of Max Shrek, with they know they can put the two to two together. But if you tell somebody, Graf Orlok or Count Orlok, unless they've actually seen the movie and done any looking into it, they're not going to know exactly what the hell you're talking about, really. But this movie did make several people's greatest movies of all time list, including the Vatican. The Vatican. Wow. Okay. Whew. This is the oldest surviving Dracula film and the first to be released. Interesting, huh? Um, the this movie, a classic. The movie itself tells a familiar story. If you're familiar at all with the Dracula story, uh, you know, uh, a count and from Transylvania buys land, comes to live in your neighborhood. There's a crazy guy that's jumping around buildings and running through the streets, Renfield ish. Um, Hutter, Harker, Mina. Ellen, you know, the story is the same. This guy comes in, this vampire sees Ellen, of course, you know, wants some of that blood. But the story is very familiar. So if you're familiar with the Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula, you're very familiar with this storyline and how it pans out. Although at the end of this movie, this is actually, I believe, um, up until this point here, there was ways to do away with vampires, right? And it had nothing to do with sunlight. Uh, you had to behead them, a stake through the chest. We've seen The Lost Boys, and the stake through the chest doesn't turn out good all the time. It's gory. It's shit everywhere, and decapitation of, you know, we've all heard the stories of through folklore of bodies that were dug up with their nails longer, teeth longer, hair. They decapitate them, rip their hearts out, all kinds of stuff they used to do in the old days. But in this movie, Nosferatu, the way to kill a vampire, daylight, sunlight. Because there's a scene at the end of the movie here where he's leaving Ellen. Um, he walks across the window, and as he's doing that, the sun's coming up. And of course, he turns instead of running and hiding and ducking to the side to save himself, uh, he stays in the sunlight and he disappears, into a pile of dust. So I think that I'm pretty sure that's where we get the idea. This movie specifically is where we get the idea that daylight will kill a vampire. Okay. You like that? I like that. Now, all in all, I got to say, Nosferatu, as a classic movie, again, it's a silent film. So if you don't have the attention span to be able to sit here and watch a silent film, you're probably not going to dig it. You're not going to be able to get into it. And you're not going to be able to enjoy it for what it is. There's a remake called Nosferatu the Vampire from the 70s. I haven't seen that one. I may check it out. I don't know. And I think I think they have a remake coming out this year. How that's going to turn out, I don't know. We shall see. I'm actually probably going to watch that one from the 70s here just to, compare and contrast, see what it's like. Nosferatu from 1922. I love it. Simple as that. I think it's a great movie. I think it's one of those movies that you can watch, even though you know the story from Dracula. You can watch it and enjoy it for the magnificence that it is. The the Max Shrek, the image that he plays, that he portrays as Orlok, it's iconic. It's uh it's nightmare fuel, really. I mean, that vampire from Salem's Lot, when I was little and I saw that, fuck, that messed me up for quite some time. Um, and of course, like I said, as I got older and I saw Nosferatu, I knew, that was very telling, very telling. Um, and I really like some of these classic vampire movies too. Um, Maybe I'll get with Christine and see if she wants to. Because I mean, there's a whole bunch of I think there's a line of Dracula Untold movies. Um, there's all kinds of, maybe I don't know. We'll think of something. Dust to Dawn movies. Those are vampires. Some of these classical vampire movies are really good. Um, they don't romanticize or shimmer their vampires in daylight. They tell a story. You know, the blood is the life, survival. Um, there's also some of those Hammer horror movies from the, was it 60s? I don't remember. I'm gonna check some of those out too. We need to get on a ball with this because I like me some classic vampire movies. Now, that's it for Nosferatu. There's really not much to the movie. Um, and I'm guessing that some of these silent movies that I'm going to do here the next couple weeks, um, it's probably going to be pretty similar. Episodes aren't going to be that long. I'm just going to spit them out to put them out, you know, because I want to get through some of these classic 20s horror. Now, of course, we move to the 30s and we have stuff like, I think Frankenstein, Dracula, the Universal stuff's coming out. Um, but I'm going to go decade by decade and cover probably, three, four, five, four movies each decade um, that stand out to me. If y'all have any ideas on movies to cover, hit me up. Let me know. You can send me an email over at guesswhatyourewrongog@gmail.com or podcastyourwrong@gmail.com. Hit me up on the Facebooks, on the TikToks, on the Instagrams, on the YouTubes here and stuff like that. If you have any ideas, hit me up. Let me know. We do have other episodes coming out as well. Working on Demons 2 is coming up. And like I've said before, we have Ash vs. Evil Dead Season 2 coming out. We're going to be working on The Devil's Rejects with Mr. Tom Crumb and busting into some Romero classics with none other than Philbilly Moonshine from over at philbillymoonshine.com. Now, those aren't scheduled yet, so don't get your hopes up as when they're coming out, but they are coming out. So that's it. That is Nosferatu. That is a little bit of housekeeping for what's coming up and what's going to be going on going forward. We are actually starting. I think I'm recording tomorrow night. I think tomorrow night. We're actually starting the Saw franchise. Saw 1 is going to be coming out. So Jiggy Saw Girl, I'm going to be hitting you up on that as well. Letting you see if you got any pointers. Say. But that's it. That is all we have for you this evening here at Guess What You're Wrong. Nosferatu 1922. Check it out. Like I always like to say, sweet dreams, love, peace, and chicken grease.